Let's first take a look at how to center a jacket back hoop. The first thing we're going to do is whenever we walk up to the machine, we want to get in the habit of just pressing number 1. What that does is that would put the number 1 needle over the needle plate, just so we can use the number 1 needle as a reference. Now you'll notice it didn't move because in this case, needle number 1 is already over the needle plate. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to go into Tools. We're going to go down to Frame Center. We're going to press Set, and we're going to press Start. We're going to allow the frame to move, and once it stops, we're going to load the garment. You'll notice the garment was not loaded while I was hitting that frame center because I wanted to give the machine a chance to actually center itself. So now we'll load the garment. Always reach inside. Make sure you're not going to sew the front and the back of the shirt together. And if we take a large measuring device, you will see that the number 1 needle lines up at 8 1/4 inches, which is the center of the hoop. That's left to right. Front to back, the total depth of the hoop is just about 11 inches, and sure enough, we are at 5 1/2 inches, which is the halfway point for this hoop. That means that that needle is dead center on that hoop. Now that works for our jacket backs. Now, that frame center function also works for our left chest logos. And put that on the machine. Again, reaching inside. Make sure we're not going to sew the front and back of the shirt together. And there are 2 different methods we can use for checking center. We could use that frame center function, or we can make sure we're on needle number 1, which in this case we are. And now simply make sure needle number 11 is over the left center screw on this hoop. So if I pull down needle number 11, you will see that it's right over this left center screw, which means needle 1 is centered on that hoop. Now, if this were a 6 needle machine, we wouldn't have 11 needles. We would only have 6. So that technique doesn't work. So, let's move this so it's off of center. And let's look at another technique called the rubber band technique. We simply take a hoop and we take a rubber band. We take the rubber band and we put it over one end of the hoop. We flip it 180 degrees and put it over the other end. Get it on the corners and snap it. That is the dead center point of that hoop. Now we place it on the machine. And we use the arrow keys to line up needle number 1 right over that crosshair. And that is absolute center. Now, of course, we would just take this off, remove the rubber band, put this back on. And those are the 3 different methods that work for centering the hoop. In the event that I go to use the auto frame center function, it doesn't line up, then I need to set a new frame center. So let's take a look at that. If I go into Tools and I go down to Frame Center, I hit Set, I hit Start, and now I put this garment on here. If you look at that, you know that that number 1 needle is not centered on that hoop. And we can verify that by looking at needle number 11 to make sure it's not over that left center screw, which in this case it is not. So we need to reset this. To reset the frame center function, we take the hoop off, we go into Tools, we go down to the frame center function, we hit Set, but now instead of hitting Start, we hit New. The frame will move. After it's done, we put the garment back on the machine. And if we read the screen here, it's saying, do you want to save the new frame center? Well, not yet, because it's not centered. So now, using one of the rubber band tricks or the number 11 needle over that left center screw, I want to center this. So I'm going to use the number 11 needle. Going to line this up. And as long as that's lined up, I know that this is in the center of that hoop. Now I simply say yes, and that becomes my new absolute center. Now let's take a look at centering a cap. If we're going to sew the front of a cap, or even if we're doing a 270 sew out, we're sewing the front and the side at the same time, we're going to start by walking up to the machine and pressing 1 so that the number 1 needle is over the needle plate. Now we want to ensure that that number 1 needle is over the center seam of that hat. So I'm simply going to pull down the presser foot by hand so it's closer to the hat, and then using the arrow keys, align that number 1 needle with the center seam of that hat. Once it's lined up left and right, I also need to check my front to back dimension. I want to center the needle somewhere between the strap and the front edge of the driver. So to find the front edge of the driver, you can feel where it ends. I like to fold the hat down, and I just want to be centered between here and here. So if I pull that needle down again, you can see it's way too close to the front of the hat. So again, using my arrow keys, I just make my adjustment until it's centered. Now I'm ready to trace my hat. If we want to sew on the side of a hat, perhaps this hat had a design already on the front, and we want to put a flag on the side, maybe we wanted to put some initials or a name on the side, maybe we want to put a number on the side. The first thing I want to do is make sure the number 1 needle is over the needle plate. So I do that by first pressing number 1. That puts the number 1 needle over the needle plate. And I'm going to gently pull down on the needle, and using the arrow keys, I'm just going to roll the hat over to the side panel. And I am literally going to center this needle right on this side panel, and then do my trace and sew on the side.